Hey, what is up everybody, it's Geet. It's been almost 2 months since the Moto 360 smartwatch was released, and because I happened to get one early on, I've had about the same amount of time to see how it really works and integrates itself into my life, and I wanted to share some of my 360 thoughts and habits with you. I noticed recently that it's still hard to get, so for those of you considering whether or not to pull the trigger on it, or for those of you just interested in how a smartwatch like the 360 is useful, let me just begin with the fact that while the picture is not as rosy as what I showed you in the introduction, I think this watch is great. For me, it's the best round Android Wear watch and possibly the best all-around smartwatch available to date. Now on the hardware end of things, the biggest selling point to me of the 360 is that it sports a beautiful, round, metal, bezel-free display. And there's this flat tire at the bottom. But the thing is that it's crucial for driving graphics and responding to ambient light, and it's what allows for the bezel-free display to exist, so it doesn't bother me at all. I was surprised at how light it is, and that makes wearing it from day to day very comfortable, especially since I don't usually wear a watch. The bottom of the watch has a heart rate sensor, and there's an on-off button on the side that has a nice gold lining around it. I chose to get the stainless steel look with the gray leather band, and the whole watch fits my wrist very well, but I can see how for others it would be too big. The band is very comfortable and has not worn out for me over the past 2 months, and there are other options along the way, and I have linked a couple of interesting videos that lets you put custom bands from other manufacturers on there. The 360 does have an older processor, and while I used to experience some pretty annoying lag, especially right at the beginning of starting the watch, a lot of that seems to have gone away in the most recent update, which I'm pretty happy about. The design of the 360 watch convinced me that this is a watch I actually want to wear, but the way I interact with the watch through Android Wear is really what convinced me that it's worth keeping. The problem with the smartwatch is that it has to fill a role that your phone or other device really can't, and honestly there aren't nearly as many situations where a smartwatch is useful when compared to a smartphone. The key factor that may determine whether a smartwatch is worth it for you is the value of having it in situations where it's inconvenient to simply pull out a smartphone out of your pocket. So without further ado, here are 4 situations that I've found a smartwatch more useful than pulling a smartphone out of my pocket. First is when I'm walking, for example like walking the dog. Second is while cooking. Third is while driving safely, ideally at stop situations like a red light. And fourth, when your phone is not with you but nearby, for example when you're charging it. I use a lot of Android Wear features in these situations. For all 4 situations, I tend to use notifications, note-taking, and reminders the most. Notifications are super useful. There are many times when I miss my phone vibration or ringtone for some reason or another, but I never seem to miss one from my wrist. And it's really easy to customize which apps are allowed to notify you, and you can temporarily mute all notifications together. Note-taking is probably my most used and favorite feature. It allows me to capture a thought while I'm walking or driving without having to remember it and then write it down later. You can use Google Keep directly, or you can hook to another application. I'm a huge Evernote user, so I send all notes to that account for processing later. Voice recognition from Google now is pretty solid, and I'm impressed at how it does in loud situations. There are still some issues with longer notes, and the voice is definitely not perfect. It would be great to have audio notes, but an app that currently does that seemed to not work for me well. In most situations, I find reminders very useful for remembering little tasks, especially now that they integrate with Inbox. I tend to place all the little tasks in reminders and more important thoughts as notes. When driving and walking, I often use music controls, voice responses to messages, and navigation. Especially for those of you who don't have a super integrated car setup or listen to music or audiobooks on walks, being able to transition tracks and adjust volume straight from the wrist is far less of an interruption than using a smartphone directly. Also, on a few occasions I've conveniently been able to respond to a text message with something like delayed 15 minutes while at a red light or walking. Navigation is particularly useful because it provides a vibration notification of turns, and it is easy to see instructions from my wrist while the hand is on the steering wheel. Although I don't use walking directions as much, it's handy that you don't have to keep your phone in your hand while you're walking through the streets. Also, mostly when walking or in transit between places, I like to be able to pull up and quickly read notes, like a location of where I parked straight from my watch. As far as more fun and encouraging features go, The daily step count is really nice and seems to be pretty accurate from my experience. Although I haven't tried it yet, I'd also really like to board a plane like a boss. Finally, the timer feature to me is most useful when cooking. Although I've found the 360 useful enough for me to keep, there are a number of things that may make this a no-buy for you. Although I walk around with the watch, I don't like to run or work out in it at all because I don't want to get that leather band all nasty. There may be Android Wear watches like the 360 in the future that are more fitness friendly, but this isn't it. This is actually one of the most compelling features of the Apple Watch to me, the exchangeable bands. If you guys would like to see a similar review of that watch, just leave a comment below or like the video and I will try to make that happen. On a similar note, the 360 is not designed for super rugged use, and if you want an example of a reviewer who decided not to keep the watch, head on over to OT for Tech's channel linked to below for a nice review there. While I think that voice commands are useful in private or around friends that know me well, I don't use them in public settings just because it seems awkward. Microsoft's playing with the ability to enter text directly into your watch, but I'm not really sure how useful that would be. My biggest comment for improvement would be to ease the process of giving a voice command. Ideally, it would be even faster and more natural than flicking your wrist or pressing a watch button and then saying, "OK Google." For example, a double press of the button on the 360 leading directly to the voice command would be sweet. So there you have it. If you're always with your smartphone and don't walk, drive, or cook, then I can't see why a smartwatch is useful for you. Otherwise, you may want to consider it as a less distracting alternative to a smartphone in these situations. Thanks a lot for checking out this video. I would love to hear any thoughts you guys have on the 360 in the comments below, and if you would like, feel free to subscribe to my channel. It's that big red button below. Thanks a lot, and I'll catch you guys on the next video. Peace.